Okay, so today I'm getting ready and I'm going to talk about the civil service system, which, if you haven't already figured out, it's one of my favorite topics. Kind of sarcasm when I say that, when I say favorite, because it's really not really something I love to talk about, but I find myself talking about it all the time because it is a real problem in our country. So there is a misconception from a lot of people, some people, maybe not a lot of people, that are maybe affiliated in some cases with the military community, maybe they're a military veteran, that if you're a military veteran, or historically, there's been a lack of justice in the military when it comes to abuse. It was rampant when I was in, specifically at the basic training camps. It was something that nobody talked about. I didn't even know it was so systemic until years later when I started seeing it on the news, and I began to realize, oh my gosh, like I wasn't the only person that witnessed this or experienced these abuses in basic military training. I went to 2 different basic military trainings, and it was very abusive in both of them. There was a lot of stuff going on that wasn't supposed to be going on, that was absolutely a violation of Uniform Code of Military Justice, and really in the civilian world would have been highly illegal as well. However, it wasn't being dealt with. There was a total lack of oversight altogether. And as a result, service members were getting away with things in these basic training camps and these training environments and elsewhere that basically allowed them to receive honorable discharges, clean records, and then move on. And one thing I've learned is that when you're dealing with a problem, most of the time it's systemic, and most people don't seem to realize that in America. And when you're dealing with a predator, it's typically not the only time that they've offended. It's probably a serial predator in many cases. And in the military, if you're able to get away with that behavior, eventually what happens is the service member becomes a veteran, is discharged, and then will likely, I think in my opinion, is going to continue offending in a community near you. So the reality is that you have people with clean records that may not deserve clean records, and then you have serial offenders that have created countless victims in the military environment, and then everyone's supposed to go on like it never even happened. But the problem is it did, and then you have veterans in these communities that are viewed in a positive light that may not deserve that credibility and that credit, and may actually be offending in these communities and may not be found out till later on. There was a serial killer that was actually a military veteran. And that person was able to offend for decades before getting caught once DNA evidence became a thing. And that person, I don't know if they're alive still. I know that they were locked up and they threw away the key, basically. I don't know if they're still alive because they were in their 70s by the time they got locked up. But the point is, I don't think that person, after they got out of the military, just became an offender. I think that they likely were offending in the military. That's my opinion. No proof of it. And that's the thing about it is that people don't just start abusing people out of nowhere. There's like a history. It starts somewhere, And with the civil service system, there's a lot of illegal behavior that happens. And when I say civil service system, I'm talking about the federal government and the bureaucracy labyrinth that people are working in when they work in departments of defense as a civilian, or the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, or the Federal Bureau of Investigations, or any number of these other agencies. And there's a ton of criminal behavior that happens in these agencies, a ton of illegal stuff that happens, a ton of abusive behavior. And I don't care who the person is, whether they're affiliated with the military or not. Like, if someone's doing something that's harming other people, they should be stopped, period. It shouldn't be a thing of like, oh, you get a pass because you're affiliated with the military or something. And so the civil service system needs to be dismantled, deconstructed, whatever you want to call it, reorganized, whatever. The bureaucracy needs to stop because it doesn't work. The reason we have at-will employment and we don't have a civil service system in America is because it allows for more innovation. So many companies out there are doing things every single day that improve the lives of so many people. I'm dealing with some different private companies right now, and their work and their at-will employment situation is improving my life and other people's lives, whereas the government, the federal government, They're taking more than they're giving. They're taking more tax money than what benefit they're providing. And a lot of the stuff that we have in the government could be cut without harming anyone. It would actually be beneficial. And eliminating a civil service system would be beneficial, and making an at-will employment system. So this was really close to happening with one of the politicians. I'm not going to name which ones. If you know your policy, then you'll know which one I'm talking about. One of the politicians that's no longer in office almost installed at-will employment in the federal civil service system. And I was like so excited. I was all about it. And it would have effectively dismantled finally the civil service system. Well, unfortunately, that person's no longer in office and able to implement the policy, and no one cares to implement that policy. And I think it's because I think our government's corrupt. I think these politicians don't care about American citizens mostly, and that's why it didn't happen. There's a lot of lobbying that's going on that's encouraging things to not change and the status quo to stay the same. And it's a problem. And sometimes I will get people wanting to say to me, well, you know, a lot of veterans work in the civil service system. Okay, and the civil service system's failing. That needs to change. Period. It's irrelevant who's working in the civil service system. If it's a failing system, the system needs to change. Period. And military affiliation I'm not going to give anyone a pass for military affiliation. Like, if you're doing things you should not be doing, or engaging in criminal misconduct, there should be accountability for that. Period. End of story.